This is a very interesting panel that we are having here today about a topic which is so relevant in the current times. That is advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in research. And we're talking about the strategies and best practices. So I read this somewhere, I think by a very renowned author, that strength comes in differences, not in similarities, by Stephen Covey, the author of the highly selling book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So hence we are talking about diversity, but also equity and inclusion, equally important. And the importance of DEI in research cannot be overstated. Embracing diverse perspectives, experiences, backgrounds enriches the scientific process, drives innovation, and fosters a more equitable and just society. But see, just putting these words on my mouth and speaking in front of you doesn't make a difference. We need to have some real good intentions to make this work. I would like to invite the moderator of this panel, Ms. Shubhra Priyadarshini, first on the stage. Shubhra is the chief editor of Global Supported Projects Nature Portfolio, and she's also the co-chair of Springer Nature's employee network, which is SN Women. And in both her roles as a chief editor and a co-chair, she is working actively in these, and she leads a number of projects related to diversity, inclusion, equity. So she is a very apt moderator for this panel. And now I would like to, and I feel honored to invite Professor Biswa Sarup Mishra, Dean Academics at Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar. It's a pleasure to have you, sir. He's also the professor of economics, actually, a learned man. I now invite Dr. Sangamitra Pati, director at Regional Medical Research Center, Bhubaneswar. And I read about her. She's an expert in multimorbidity research. Actually, leading one of the India's first research was led by her on multimorbidity. And last but really not the least, Nishita, so is the founder and CEO of Nexus Power, Nishita Baliar Singh. Yeah, thank you, and sorry for reading it incorrect. She's a sustainability enthusiast, and her organization, Nexus Power, manufactures rechargeable bioorganic batteries from crop residue. Can you imagine? So very excited to have this wonderful panel here today. And thank you so much for kindly accepting our invitation. And Shubhra, I now leave it to you. You are in safe hands, all of you. And Shubhra will be moderating. Thank you.
Thank you for reposing faith in me, Alpana. Very warm welcome to an illustrious panel here. And of course, an equally illustrious and engaged audience, I must say, who's come post-lunch to a panel which is running parallel to another really important one. So welcome. This is my hometown. So samastanku bahut swagat for coming to this panel. आशा करुच्ची किसी शिखिकी जिबा हमारे आज panel रू. And to my colleagues who are present here from all over the world, from Springer Nature. Today's panel, of course, is on a subject that's very, very close to my heart. As you just heard from Alpana, I lead a bunch of diversity, equity, and inclusion activities at Springer Nature. And I'm very proud to be the global chair of SN Women, which is our women's employees network. It's also a subject that's very high on the collective conscience of my organization, SN, Springer Nature, because we have seen over the years that these are not merely words for employees at Springer Nature. We are doing several things at Springer Nature which take the diversity, equity, and inclusion factor in our operations just a little higher. Of course, we have lots of miles to cover, like in any aspect of work or diversity. And something that has been bothering me today is a slight lack of diversity in our own panels elsewhere, and I've voiced it enough times to the organizers, but I'm sure we'll make up for it the next time, so pardon us for that. This is the only panel which is as diverse in terms of people from all kinds of sociological backgrounds, economic backgrounds. There's a background from research, from entrepreneurship. So, and of course, age is not a factor when we are talking about diversity. So we are sort of covering ground on most of those issues. It's really heartwarming to see the kind of response we have got over the years talking about diversity in the social and research spheres of work that we do. So we've had several such panels in the past as well, talking about the problems specifically of what ails academia and research. And all of us know the problems, really. And all of us have time and again spoken about how it affects the way we deliver science, we deliver research, we deliver in our own spheres, small little niches, we deliver things of importance. So today we'll concentrate more on the solutions and the best practices, like Alpana just mentioned, of what we do when we recognize these problems and how in our own small little worlds we can make that change. It could be change based on gender, it could be based on age, it could be based very, very succinctly on caste, because we had another panelist who couldn't make it today, who was an expert in how caste plays a role in our socio-economic and research landscape in this country. So that's also a very important aspect in India. And we did a full coverage of caste-based discrimination in academia in Nature some time back. Why diversity matters.
Why do we need diversity? We need diversity for three reasons. One is those who benefit from any research, patients, community members, or organizations. For them to be benefited equitably and equally, we need to see that the research has been done in representative group of all those population who are going to benefit from that particular research. And in fact, I was discussing with Subhra at the lunchtime. There is a lot of discussion around anemia status in India, BMI, and all these standards, I mean, all of you might be aware that are derived from Western standards. We compare our anemia status, our BMI status, our long volume status, which has been derived from Western population, and try to categorize our patients and our people and stratify them at higher risk, lower risk, based only on data that is coming from people who have never been participated or who have never been a part of that whole standardization study. So that it's time for introspection, it's times for thinking, and it's times for also doing something. And the second purpose why we need diversity in research is that the best example I can give, COVID pandemic. Here is a situation where each discipline with its unique perspective contributed to the whole kaleidoscope of COVID-19 pandemic management. Never ever we have seen social workers to economists to biotechnologists contributing to a unified goal which COVID-19 pandemic very strongly demonstrated. And the benefit or the advantage of having a diverse perspective in research is that each one brings their own story. I do not know whether anyone from anthropology, but in anthropology there is two perspectives we call. One is emic perspective and another is ethic perspective. Emic is what I think or what a particular researcher thinks about his or her domain, while emic perspective is the outside perspective, what others think about that particular research domain. And in fact, in medical research, we say that the majority of medical problems which require research are contributed by factors which are outside the medical domain. One example is maternal death. So maternal death cannot be reduced unless there is good roads, which comes under the Department of Transport, leading to good hospitals. Unless there is good mobile connection where the emergency call can be made to the ambulance to reach there. And where there is food practices or cultural taboos about institutional delivery. So it's not about making a facility or making a skilled birth attendant available in the facility, but there are so many factors that influence maternal mortality, and we call them together as social determinants of health. So in order to take account of all these determinants and see that we are really benefiting from a research and make it available to all the people, we need diversity. And I feel that for diversity, the product, the participant, and the parameters all need to consider diversity.
Yeah, that's kind of the golden three P's of diversity. Fantastic. I think that's, again, a brilliant way to bring in Nishita Baliar Singh into the subject of entrepreneurship, skill development, and how the product, the dissemination of it, as well as the final sort of culmination of all our endeavors towards bringing in more effort from not just the industry, but also from people who are part of that golden triangle would also be something we'd like to hear.
I think we have to deal with this one.
Thank you so much for that context. I come from a pure business entrepreneurship side. So how I look at it is, if you look around yourself, everything you would see will never be the same. You would find green leaves, you'll find dark green leaves, you'll find yellow leaves, you'll find orange leaves, you won't find leaves also. There'll be bare branches. Nature itself has diversity. And imagine having dal chawal every day, every meal. We have diversity in food also. We take different kind of cuisines. So it's not about something that is important or it needs to be emphasized upon. It is something very natural that we have been imbibed with. Since we've been born, I think till the last breath, you would see different elements everywhere. And the reason why we emphasize on diversity, the inclusivity, or the way you build a product in entrepreneurship, the fact is, as a person, when you grow, a lot of things influence your existence as a human. What you eat, what you see around you, what you learn, how you are groomed, how you interact with people, that builds you as a person. And it directly or indirectly also impacts your thought process and the way you look at the environment. So if you have a homogeneous mixture where everybody is groomed the same way, you're thinking the same way, you have the same mindset, you are understanding things the same way, you will not be able to build products. Because products only arise when you understand a problem. You will only understand a problem when we have different perspectives to the same thing. If everybody thinks the same way, probably we will never have problems coming up. Problems happen out of necessities. And then we look at a solution. So the entire bundle of entrepreneurship comes in where we look at a necessity, identify the problem, and then build a solution for it. So if we do not have different thought processes, we will not be able to have a problem. And then we will not be able to brainstorm on that problem. It's very important that we think differently. Each of us has different, maybe if I look at a glass of water, for some it may be half full, for some it may be half empty, for some it may be completely filled, half with air, half with water, things like that. So these are perspectives that we build. It will only happen if we think differently, and that is where diversity comes in. So when we build a product, when we're looking at a bigger perspective of how diversity actually impacts entrepreneurship, how it impacts research, we have a mixed bunch of people from different domains, from different understandings, from different perspectives. Their research areas are different. Their thought process is different. The way they see things around them is different. So automatically, when you come together, 7-8 people, 7-8 different minds, thinking about different things together towards a common goal. That's when 100 different ideas come in, maybe 1,000 different questions come up. And then one after the other, we have a question, there's somebody else who's answering it. So then that's where the difference of thought comes in. Maybe what is the problem for me might be a solution for somebody else. And that is how the inclusivity comes in. So I believe it's not only about something that is supposed to be emphasized or it is important, it is something which is very natural and we don't realize that it exists. Once we start realizing that it exists in us, it exists in the nature, I think we will be more accommodating and more open towards different kind of cultures, different genders, different thought processes, and different mindsets that will come together.
I think what she, towards the end, she said about openness. I was reflecting. Openness to the limitations of what one is doing and how one is approaching an issue. That is very much important if you want to achieve excellence in research. Because I will take a cue from economics. Like almost for 50 years, what was told as an alternative was always put into the back burner, like the neoclassical economics, which is the mainstream. So they treat the human mind is like a computer. Before you take a decision, you know your utility function, you are able to do complex mathematical calculations, optimization, and then take a decision. So, but we know that that is not possible. But when it was pointed out by Herbert Simons in 1955, I mean, they just ignored, they just downplayed until I think it took almost 5 decades that people started realizing that actually you are not rational in the sense of a neoclassical rationality, but you are rational more as a bounded rationality. That means you are rational to the extent of, subject to your cognitive limitations as well as the environmental constraints. So, yeah, so not being open, it may lead to a very, like a parochial approach and a suboptimal approach.
Absolutely. So, agreed. I think in the interest of plurality and openness, I would like to now open the floor before we go on to the next set of thoughts, and ask you if you have any burning thoughts, any. Yes, absolutely. And since this is a nice cozy room, we can feel at home and ask. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, esteemed panel and everyone here. I am Flight Captain Sridhar, a research scholar from XIM University. One question to Dr. Pratima, based on what you talked about the acceptance of the international standards. See, how to address this need to fit into the larger academic thought? Otherwise, you are ignored or you are not able to publish.
Yes, thank you for this interesting and thought-provoking question. We have to acknowledge, as already told by Professor Mishra, and open to such kind of suggestions. And we really need to find out, are we within that? Maybe I can ask the floor, what is normal? Any idea what is normal? Do you know anyone who is perfectly normal is abnormal? Do you know that? Yes, because each one of us has got our own sense of little bit non-normality in ourselves. And what exactly is normal? When we put the population parameters in a curve, plus or minus 2 standard deviation is the normal. So normality is something which is determined by the whole population data only. It's not something which has been given to you from anywhere. And having said that, maybe I would like to say that, for example, for child malnutrition, now Indian Academy of Pediatrics has come out with its own benchmarks for categorizing child malnutrition. And currently, now one of our sister institutes, that's National Institute of Nutrition, we are doing all India survey on hemoglobin status and to find out what exactly is our normal. Are we adhering or conforming to the normal that has been prescribed historically, or are we anywhere different? For example, if you took BMI, body mass index, it cannot be same for all races. So how can we accept a Western standard as the normal for us? Because we are contextually and ethnically and racially different, which includes genetic as well. And similarly, if you look at, for example, cardiovascular risk or diabetic risk, Indians because of our maybe changing diet and progressing to Western diet are becoming prematurely diabetic compared to Western. In that way, do we have to really look at our blood sugar standard or not? So that, in fact, that opens the Pandora's box, and maybe Springer Nature should come out with a special edition on Indian data and Indian standards. I would request you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is to Subramanian. See, the PhD and the research work forces us to go deep rather than focus on some amount of diverse topics, whether it is interdisciplinary, etc. Because the moment I strand 2-3 domains, then I am nowhere. Which journal would like to publish me is a big question mark. How do we address that? Thank you.
I have the perfect solution for you in that we now have launched a lot of multidisciplinary journals which go across a broad spectrum of subjects. So, for instance, we have launched this year Nature Food, Nature Sustainability, things that are unheard of in scientific publications. So we are straddling disciplines now. And at the same time, you brought up again a can of worms about PhD and how specific it looks at subjects. Nature published an editorial which veered around this subject, and the headline of the editorial was, "Where's the P in PhD?" And I think that answers a lot of questions about blinkered vision in our PhD days. I think more and more researchers are now focusing on the fact that interdisciplinarity is the future. You cannot just be cocooned in your own syllabi, in your own small little world for the research. And so I think maybe that answers.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
I have a question actually. This may be very generic type. Actually, when we are talking about this diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I think in research, in the sense of publishing a paper, there are a lot of discrimination is there. If you are belongs to Indian continent or subcontinent, in fact, then we are facing the problem that we can't even compete with the nature or Springer or some high quality publishing houses. Okay, but when we have that tag that we are coming from abroad with a postdoc position or something like that, then we can publish. So I think the editorial board or something like, I don't know whether what is the gap? Means, is there any connection that the Chinese have more nature publication than the Indian have? They have more JACs. They have more. I hope my question is delivered now.
Yes.
So I want some address. Thank you.
You have done your job quite well. So I think the answer to that is twofold. One is the way we write our research papers sometimes has a lot to be desired. In the sense that I'm not even going to the Chinese paper factory, where they know exactly which services to use to make a paper look distinct, make the methodology more robust, make each section of the paper as competitive as possible. We do lack that a bit, I think. But having said that, you're very right in pointing out that many countries in the global south might be facing this sort of, I wouldn't go as far as calling it discrimination, but probably differentiation in the way a manuscript might be handled. And again, much of that boils down to the fact that we resort to Me Too kind of science many times, where the science that I'm talking about, the problem statement that I'm working on, has already been worked on by a group of researchers somewhere else. So probably looking at our problem statements a bit more succinctly, a bit more granularly, and also presenting the data and final manuscripts in a manner that that is globally competitive. Both of these things might add to larger acceptances. Again, having said that, I feel Nature and Springer are brands that are increasingly embracing this question and making the Global South our hub. This India Research Conclave is one such activity that is leading us to getting more authorship from India. I'm hoping that it will open doors along with other activities to bring in more authorship from this subcontinent, not just India. I also feel that for Springer Nature, the world is a stage. It's not just a country specific. So if the science really shines through, it might be from Timbuktu, it will get published. So I don't have a very clear answer to your question, but I'm hedging it for the lack of a better sort of explanation to the root cause of why this might be happening.
I do fully empathize with you because I'm going to share my own experience. In 2013, I mean, when India was not acknowledged as the way now super economy and economic growth, so we had submitted, I was the PI of a Welcome Trust grant, and I was the PI, and my co-PI was from UK. And we submitted a manuscript, I won't name the journal for the sake of privacy. And as you know, the journal, though they say they blind the journal writers or the author's name, yeah, no, they blind the only author's name, but the place is there, the geography is there. And it was written that the study was done in India, okay? And in fact, the comments came and it was written that the project idea is very novel, the study design is adequate enough, methodology, sample size. But at the end, it was written that the language is not that strong. And the authors have suggested to get it corrected by a native English speaker. And the last author was a UK person. Because it was, you can see the bias, okay? And the himself, the person who was my co-PI, was kind of struck, I mean, dumbstruck to see this comment, because he was also writing this manuscript, and he realized the bias. There you can see an implicit bias. You know, it was co-authored by a native English speaker. Just because the findings was coming from India, they thought that English needs to be improved. I mean, that's what you can say. Language is something we feel. While, so that's what I wanted to point out, but now, yeah. And then my response was that, for your kind information, one of the co-authors is a native English speaker, and after that, they were dumbstruck.
Hello. Okay.
Yes.
Hello.
Fantastic. I think that really brings us to one other layer of inclusion and looking at equitable distribution of how we do things in science is language.
Oh, yes.
And increasingly, we at Springer Nature are realizing the language barrier and using not just technology to overcome it, but also focusing on regional spectra, which means that there's a Nature India now, which does science coverage in Hindi as well. There's a Nature Middle East, which does science coverage in Arabic, and there's a Nature Italy, which does science coverage in Italian. So we're trying to bridge that gap as much as possible, but of course there's lots to do. Sorry, there's another question. Yes.
Hello. Yes, I am fully agree with about the complaints, but we should be agree with us. Our Indian data quality is not up to the mark whatever Europeans or others are doing. We have to agree. And I am also agree that whatever Madam is telling, language always is there. They are writing, which is a silly things, because our research paper based on data, not the language.
Right.
But
so,
language is required to
absolutely.
convince our thoughts.
Absolutely, we got that point.
And
in the interest of time, I'll just come in front and ask you to ask a question. The idea here is that we do agree to disagree, because this is a plural panel, right? So we'll come to that.
Yeah, good afternoon, esteemed panel. I'm Dr. B.K. Mishra from RMRC Bhubaneswar. My question is, when we think of the study site, if the study site is in India, the data collection is from India, we are happy that, it's must be a good data, good study, because it's being done in a LMIC, low middle income country. But again, when we go for publication, and if it's a student, he or she is a student, and they ask for waiver of publication fee, then India is nowhere in the list of LMICs in most of the journals. So this is regarding the equity part of, so where does India stand actually?
Very good question,
That
to
is,
which I don't have an answer. So let's take some other views. I don't think we are going to question number 2 for the panel. So
Madam.
this is interesting, yeah.
Respected madam. So how can Springer Nature support to budding entrepreneur?
A budding entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I think we have a number of publications. We are a publication house. We cannot create a TBIC to be very frank, but we have a number of publications which do concentrate on startups, on entrepreneurship. On the Springer side, we have a lot of social sciences journals which welcome publications from all strata of people having business acumen and people publishing in the domain of business and economics. So that's the only way we can help you.
But
Yes, please.
I think in the diversity perspective, we have eminent scientists. You can involve and associate of institute-wise or zonal-wise
Yeah,
to be appointed as editorial chief.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We do have.
Because in Eastern Zone, Dr. Sanghamitra Pati is the most eminent.
Yes.
It's like you can appoint also for biomedical science. So we can.
I think she's on the board of 1,000 journals already. I
But-
need not appoint her.
But when we can apply to Springer Nature, it automatically rejected. So there is no scope of the. So how can we survive?
So fantastic. I think it's turning
Because-
out to be a Springer Nature convergence. But I think there's a question there. Yes, just add.
My question is kind of similar to Sir. I wanted to ask about, like, we are talking about equity and access. Here if we talk about publication in open access journals and the journals, those who are not open access, we see the citations number increasing more in if we publish in open access. And if we publish in open access, they are asking about publication fees or charges. And even in my article publication, I have found this disparity. Like, if I have published in open access, the citation goes more. And even if it's in Springer Nature, then the citation is not increasing because it is not open access. And this creates actually a Matthew effect, what we call. And there is not equity in our publication itself in terms of citation and reach. How do we address this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And open access is a subject that is being dealt in another panel, of course. But very briefly, I can just mention that the access to science in countries like India will only increase if there is a total open access environment, which is difficult for publishers to do justice to, because they are all commercial entities. So you will understand that we come from the point of view of publishing more papers, publishing more open access, publishing more in the global south if we could. We had just a question about LMICs and the global south. So I feel like we are all pretty enamored with that question right now in our own publishing house. And there is a shift in thinking about how more and more people from the global south can publish without really spending 6 months of their salary in one paper, right? And there is also a lot of churning inside our own publishing house, as is the case with many other scientific publishers and scholarly publishers, about how we can do a kind of differential pricing for people. Yes. And there's of course now talks of giving 100% waivers. It is, but the number of submissions has to grow up substantially for us to be able to do justice to that waiver. So there are policies in place, but we really need to climb the submission ladder in this country and elsewhere in the global south to be able to do justice to those kinds of policies. It's still in the framework of policy, but I'm hoping for a world and a future where we don't just do it as a policy, but we are able to show some real ground results. So hopefully 5 years from now, that question will be redundant. Yes.
Well, maybe I'll take you back because you mentioned budding entrepreneur. So I just want to ask you, what is step 2 for you as a budding entrepreneur after your journal is published? So where is the entrepreneurship then? So see, there is a big difference between research and entrepreneurial research. When you do a research in entrepreneurship, the research primarily is so that you can build a product and sell the product. right? So if there's a journal publication involved between, either you are building a product which has to be sold. So as an entrepreneur, the journal publication is just an aid to your product, that people know that this company is doing something which is going to go into the market ultimately.
So if you are looking at further soften up to tier level 9, so how can you soften to know all these things?
And how would the journal publication help?
So journal publication will be transparent. This is the innovation up to this mark. Further people can carry forward.
So, but you know what? The point is that instead of a journal, if you look at a patent, your innovation remains protected. So entrepreneurship can go around there. I'm sorry, I'll just take a minute. So when we talk about journals, once, if you look at how patents happen, once your technology innovation is out published, it cannot be patented. So as an entrepreneur, I think for me, journals are important, yes. We browse through journals, a lot of literature review comes from there. We also put in our details of how we moved, what we've done so far, what is the future scope. But a lot of research core to the product, because the product has to be in the market, will actually be patented. And that will remain with us till I don't go into the market.
The product is formed after tier level 9. So unless not till tier level 9 or this, the product
Okay,
will
let me intervene here because I don't know. So I think what we are talking about here can be illustrated by an example, which is that very recently we published a piece on Map My Genome's recent advances in picking up the genetic diversity of Indians. What Map My Genome did is first patented the product, like you're mentioning very clearly, and then they published a paper. So, which meant the patent is already there, the paper has come out, their product is doing massively well already in the market. So it could be viewed as a roundabout way of doing academic publishing, unless and until you are very sure that the product is marketable, product has the capacity to create a niche for itself. I think that many entrepreneurs, like Nishita just mentioned, would shy away from publication because it takes away from the fact that you have sole proprietorship on the product itself. So
I'll just add on,
Yeah.
because you spoke about TRL levels. Not every technology ultimately goes into being a full product. Sometimes at TRL 4, TRL 5, when you're confident, TRL 5 is when you've established a lab level prototype, you have had some pilots, right? So not every product will go to TRL 9 and then go into the market as a product being sold under your brand. A lot of products, when the bigger companies come in, they buy you at TRL 5 and TRL 4 because you've established technology. So what you do is license technology. And that only happens when you have a patent.
exactly. So I think that's a really nice discussion which can be had offline. And I do feel like, I enjoyed the panel. We didn't go to question number 2 like you saw because there's so much interest among all of you and you're so engaged. I think all the other questions certainly can be addressed to them offline after we have disembarked. I'll call the panel to a close with a heavy heart because we had so much to discuss, yeah. We had so much to discuss. I know. We could go on and on. But we are still in the room and we can still sort of, maybe outside the room, we can take this discussion further. Thank you so much for being such a fantastic audience. Bahut dhanyavad.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Shubhra, may I request you to felicitate the panelist? Yeah, I now request Shubhra to felicitate Professor Biswasrup Mishra. Sir, please come here. Nishita, can you please come here? Shubhra, can you felicitate Nishita Valia Singh? Dr. Saga Mitrapati. And honoring the diversity panel, I would request Nishita to please come here and felicitate our moderator, Shubhra. Well, thank you so very much.